Perfect.
Yeah, there you go. I got it. I just renamed it. So I said Ash Patel. Got it?
Yeah.
They do. I'm not that good looking as Tommy is. People have figured out, how did Ash get so good?
But do you guys see him on your screen?
Yes.
Ah, I see. Yeah. Sorry about that. My bad. There you go.
Okay, Ravi, start off.
It's 56 people.
Yeah, I think it is 11:31, so we should start. Hello, everyone. My name is Anshuman Sinha. I'm the TiE SoCal president for 2020 and 2021. TiE SoCal brings you this great webinar, and I'm thankful to Ash Patel and Commercial Bank of California to give us time and be a panelist on this webinar. This is going to be helpful to all the business owners who are going to join us. We are going to record this event, and we will provide the recorded link for future use also. So here with that, Ravi, the floor is yours.
Hey, thank you very much, Anshuman. We want to welcome everybody to this show. Specifically, a special thanks right up front to Shankar Ram for bringing us this very esteemed panel. We are excited to talk about raising capital and thriving with small business stimulus grant, and we are looking forward to learning from our esteemed panelists. We have Ash Patel, who serves as president and CEO of the Commercial Bank of California. And he brings over 20 years of experience serving in the banking industry. He has been involved from a banker with an entrepreneurial drive to a seasoned CEO focused on inspiring his team and clients to achieve their dreams. Ash leads by example and invests in building relationships and cutting-edge technology to enhance the client experience. Ash invests in human capital through the PJ2B, Purposeful Journal to be a Billionaire, to a Billion initiative. This initiative has led to an inspired CBC team, tailored client experience, and the successful turnaround of CBC, which is fast becoming a privately held billion-dollar bank. Under his leadership, CBC has shown significant growth from around 200 million in assets in 2013 to approximately 825 million as of 30th June 2017. I'm looking forward to see that new number because that is an old number, but a 4x increase is absolutely awesome. Growth was accomplished both organically and through the acquisition of National Bank of California. Our next guest is going to be Christopher Kalala. He is Executive Vice President and Chief Credit Officer. He brings over 15 years of Southern California banking experience with extensive knowledge of credit organization and business banking, with an additional 10 plus years of banking regulatory oversight. Chris oversees all credit administration functions, including developing credit offerings, establishing leading standards and guidelines, supervising loan underwriting activity, overseeing loan documentation and servicing functions, and ensuring compliance with leading related government regulations. So welcome to the group. Christopher Kalala joined Commercial Bank of California in October 2013, following his employment with Wedbush Bank in Los Angeles, California, where he was very favorably served a similar role for 3 years, commencing in October 2010. Christopher Kalala has a Bachelor of Science and a Bachelor of Business Administration at Arizona State University and completed graduate level education program with Pacific Coast Banking School from Seattle, Washington. Welcome to the group, Christopher. We're looking forward to your insights. Our third guest here is Neil Page. He is Executive Vice President, Chief Risk Officer of California Commercial Bank. Neil has extensive knowledge in enterprise risk management, financial structuring, and analytics. community banking specifically targeting commercial, industrial, corporate, and consumer banking products. Neil is responsible for governing risk management framework and risk function, including but not limited to identifying, analyzing, monitoring, and mitigating firms' internal and external risk exposure. Neil has served as a chief risk officer for banking entities, which include Far East National Bank and Macquarie Bank USA over a 20-year period in the banking business. Neil is a registered professional engineer. Yay, I'm an engineer too. Is a registered professional engineer, holds Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering and an MBA in Finance. Welcome to you all. I will hand the screen over to, I will hand the mic over to, the floor over to Ash while I just change the presentation out here. And Ash, if you, the floor is all yours. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. I hope everybody can hear me and see me. I've done this several times, so this is like my fourth one. I'm trying to do my community service by giving everybody an opportunity. I've spoken at TiE several times, so it's not unfamiliar territory when Navneet was chairman, and then Harina is chairman, and then obviously currently the current chairman. I'd like to make this as interactive as we can. So, you know, you've all gone and seen and heard about on Google, treasury.gov, sba.gov, we can see you've got all the questions that you may have. So rather than me trying to go through the whole presentation, I've done this several times. There's a lot of questions of the process. How do I apply? So I want to make this time as most valuable for you guys as it can be, rather than me and Neil and Chris talking about the program, because there's a lot of public information out there, which I'm sure you guys already know. So in my mind, either Ravi and Anshuman, my preference is we'll let the introductions go through, and then we'll have Neil and Christopher also answer questions. As far as your numbers, you asked me where we're at. We're a $1.2 billion bank now. So 2017, we were 800. We're over 1.2 billion now. And I'll also tell you one thing, this current CARE Act, we have 150 million of loans that we already have in process right now with 400 applicants, existing borrowers. So by the time we're done with this, we're probably a $1.4, $1.5 billion bank. So we'll be growing our bank through this program currently. We are receiving a lot of applications. And at the moment, we're only addressing all of our customers and friends and family. We haven't even opened it for our non-customers yet.
Oh, congratulations. That's fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So that's the size of our bank. We are an SBA lender, and I'll let Neil and Chris get introduced. And if nothing else, we can open up for Q&As however you want to do it, or we can continue to go down the path and see what else you guys want to do. And I can give you some tips as to what to do. So normally by now you'd have people with questions on chats or how you want to open up the Q&A. So Anshuman and Ravi, I'll let Neil and Chris just introduce themselves. I know you gave a great introduction from the resumes and the CVs. So Neil, can you just say a few words, and then Chris, and then we'll see if we have questions. If not, we'll go to the program.
Sure. My name is Neil Pinjay. I serve as the Chief Risk Officer, as you presented, Ravi. And my role is to ensure that the bank continues to operate in a safe and sound manner. What that means is I'm a good guy, but I'm a bad guy as well, with reference to some of the regulations that are being imposed upon it. My role, quite simply placed for the purpose of this audience, is to make sure that we run the program, which is your PPP program, also known as the PPP program or the Paycheck Protection Program out there, which is a subsidy of the I'm also running the program, my colleague Chris, so I'll let him do most of the talking. But my role is to make sure that we run the entire program effectively with reference to the government regulations or the regulatory bodies that have been imposing upon us, as well as making sure that we comply with the regulations, comply with some of the criteria that have been mentioned thereof, as well as make sure that the documents and the disclosures thereof are fielded in a safe and sound manner and are ensuring that we follow stringent audited process along the way. That's my role in short. I'll now revert it to back to the panel. Thank you.
Christopher, do you want to just introduce yourself so we can then get to Q&As, or we can continue? Christopher.
Sure. I'll keep my introduction short. It's first of all, I want to thank TiE Group for giving us this opportunity to speak to them. It's a really great pleasure. As Ash pointed out, my role is Chief Credit Officer at the bank. I work under his guidance, and I'm probably nothing but a good guy at this moment because I'm looking forward to making those loans get funded. My role in this was to learn everything possible about the final rule that came out from the SBA. What's the process to get it funded? Created a task force, and you see that on the slide, for credit administration to work hand in glove with the SBA department to create a task force that would be the experts at the bank on rolling out the funding of these PPP loans that was made available through the CARES Act. And so we also opened up a web page. First, the CDC had a coronavirus resource guide that was put out there. And then that rolled really into a secondary page that explained to interested parties and had a kind of, you can almost call it a pre-qual process for getting into our queue for making those loans available. I've 20 years been a chief credit officer. I won't go through my resume. What's more important is, I'm with Ash on this. What's most important to me is to be available to ask your questions. We reached out to all our clients to answer their questions and help them get into our queue and get the funds available as soon as possible. So that's what I'd like to work with you and afford you that opportunity if you have any questions.
Excellent. Thank you. So we had one more slide out here, I think, with Neil. So Ash, did you want to? Neil, did you want to go through the slide, or are you ready for questions? What would you like to do?
I'm happy to just take about 2 minutes to talk about the program that's there, if possible, and then we can open it up to questions for those of your audience that are still unaware of the PPP, if that works for you.
Perfect. We have about 90 participants online so far. So what I'm doing is, participants, if you can just type in your questions on the Q&A button, I will try to pick up all the questions from the chat and ask the panelists, because it's difficult monitoring, managing 90 voices coming up. So Neil, if you could go through this, what I will do is try to keep a tab on what questions are coming up and go through the list on the Q&A.
And Chris and Neil, you can see the Q&As. There's 5 questions. I've done this before, so you can just look at it. We'll let Anshuman and Ravi pick the questions we need to answer. That's how we've always done, because there'll be so many questions. So I'll let the TiE chair pick the questions we need to answer that's most pertinent. So I don't normally pick the question to be answered. I let you, Ravi and Anshuman, pick the question that we should answer. I'm reviewing the questions as they're coming up. If I find something that's most important, I'll use it. So Neil and Chris, if you guys can go to that, and I'll let you finish, Neil, your 2 minutes, and then we'll go into Q&A. Happy to.
Sure. Real quick, on the payroll protection program, also known as the PPP program, there are certain basics that have been approved by the government, and essentially for this time, they're making it a bank's conduit to it. What that means is the money flows through to the bank, and the bank essentially is responsible for imparting that money to its various clients. The basic program, or the basic structure of the PPP program, is the federal program is now authorizing $349 billion in guaranteed loans. Those are guaranteed for only those eligible participants that essentially file or complete the application with their respective bank. Finally, small and medium-sized businesses can receive up to $10 million. Be careful on that up to, because this is a payroll protection program. So you're capped at whichever is lower, whichever is associated with your payroll's protection plan. So it cannot essentially exceed the minimum of your payroll number, as well as $10 million where it's capped. All of the loan proceeds could be potentially forgiven, and I sort of want to emphasize the use of could. It need not be forgiven in certain areas. and I can, happy to field some of the questions that you have. There are no personal guarantees or collateral required for these loans. That makes it very alluring to this program. And loans are issued by banks that are either SBA approved or approved specifically for this process. And most of the clients that we are handling with have questions associated with what constitutes a payroll and payroll cost. And for purpose of simplicity, I just want to create a touch point, which actually gets into 3 or 4 bullet points here, which is salaries, wages, commissions, and similar compensation gets into an attributable payroll cost. Payments of tips or cash tips or equivalent. Payments of vacation, parental, family, medical, or sick leaves also gets into the payroll costs. Payments associated with group healthcare benefits, retirement benefits are also a part of the payroll costs. This is a quick overview of what we have on the payroll cost. As far as the forgiveness line applies, there is a forgiveness of certain attributes of the loan if you meet following criteria, which is expenses of payroll, which constitute at least 75% of those loans, could be forgiven if an appeal is made or an application is made to the bank, but so that they can work through the logistics. Payment of interest, specifically for covered mortgage obligations prior to February 15th, 2020 is also used. And lease expenses that have been enforced prior to February 15th also can be forgiven if applied for. Requirements are, submit your applications with your lender within 8 weeks of receiving the funds. Docs such as number of employees, pay rates, payment obligations, and so forth. Certification is required, and lenders must be eligible for forgiveness. For all loans that are not forgiven, interest rates shall be at 1%. Payments can be deferred up to 6 months, and there are no prepayment penalties or fees. These loans are essentially accruable for up to 2 years. That's the program in a nutshell. And I just want to get started, given some of the regulations are keeping on changing, so it's a moving target. So I'm sure Chris will agree with me that this is a moving target. We continue to learn about this every minute, and sometimes it's on the hour, every hour, where the regulations are changing and we have to adapt to them. That's, go ahead, Chris.
Very good recital. And Ash, if it's okay with you, I'll go ahead and start answering some questions.
Hey, Chris, excuse me. Chris, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. Chris, I think there's a microphone problem with your computer.
Correct. Yes, we can't hear you, Chris. So Anshuman or Ravi, I'd like you guys, there's 50 or 30 questions right now. So what I'd like to do is you pick the question that you feel your constituency wants to be addressed. So Chris, Neil, I don't want to pick the questions we want to answer. I would like you, because it's a TiE membership, you pick the question you want and one of us will answer it. That works just best.
Thank you, Ash. So
there's 31 questions and there's 31 questions and 9 chats. So we'll quick quiet. Why don't you pick a couple of questions that you feel most appropriate and then we'll answer it, okay?
Yeah, thank you, Ash. And before Ravi start picking up the questions, I saw 2 which are, I feel, beneficial to answer at this point of time. One of the question is it possible to make corrections? We made a couple of mistakes in the application.
Good question. Christopher, is your mic working now properly?
So can you hear me?
No, your mic is not working, Chris. There's a very staticky. The question, let me answer that question, Neil can help me, is that no, it's very hard once the ETRAN number is pulled out. If you submit an application and we've got the ETRAN number from the SBA, it becomes very, very hard to go back. In fact, that question was asked earlier today as well, that if you had to go back, you risk losing. We have to cancel your first application and then reapply. So it is very difficult to amend if you've made a mistake. It's a once and done. So be very careful when you apply to your bank. And if your bank has already pulled an ETRAN number, it's very hard. If you give it to your bank and the bank hasn't yet pulled the PLP number, then yes, you can change it. But if it's already gone to SBA and you have a PLP number, then it's going to be very hard. Chris, can you see if your mic worked correctly now? Chris?
Yes, I'm trying to adjust it, but I'm just not finding any success. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I think, Anil, if you could give the call-in number to Chris so that he can call in for the voice.
Yeah, audio.
That might work.
And
So
while
the
that's
second question, which I see multiple times here, is thank you, Neil, for identifying what is covered as a payroll expense. There is a question that, how about paying 1099 independent contractors? If you have a large base of 1099, can they be put together as a payroll expense and be applied for that?
Neil or Christopher, I can answer that. Go ahead, Neil. Oh, Christopher, do you want to try?
Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
Yes, I will try. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's very bad, very staticky. Sorry.
But go ahead. We'll try to get that if you can. Go ahead.
Answer it. Christopher, answer it.
Okay, so the question is about a sole proprietor.
1099.
1099 contract.
1099 contract.
They're eligible, but they're not eligible if you're paying 1099. You can't use them as part of your payroll to determine the size of your loan or to forgive your loan. But they're eligible to participate starting April 10th on their own. The program is available for them to apply for the loan.
Our next question is from Sanjay Dalal. What is the deadline for applying? What are the deadlines for applying for these loans?
What we are seeing out there is an open window from April 3rd when this program first was incepted, and the government is saying from April 3rd to June 20th, 2020. But I think it's the way it's working right now is there are only $349 billion of guaranteed loan program that the government is saying. So they could shut it down anytime once that number is hit. So it's really first come, first serve number. So the earlier you get into the hopper or the pipeline and you get an ITRAN number, you are better off in receiving the funding. So I would not delay in filing these documents and making sure that you're first in line. Also, I think working with your bank is pretty critical for the type of the documents that you have as well. So with reference to the deadline, yeah, definitely move as quickly as you can, because once the funds get depleted, then
Excellent.
it's a guessing game.
Yeah, you were breaking up in the end, Neil, but that actually merges into another question from Edward Pulraj. With your bank fund PPP, will your bank fund PPP SBA loan to non-customers?
Oh, I can take that. I just got a live update from my SBA task force. We're at $167 million with 500 applications. So at the moment, we are not taking any applications for non-customers. However, if there's a compelling argument to be made, we'll consider it. But at the moment, my obligation is to the people that have already applied. We have $167 million of people that already need the funds that we need to give the money out to, because we need to process these applications, approve these applications, and send the money, because they have payroll to make by Friday. Some companies have to make payroll by the 15th, and they need to have the funds right now. So if we keep on taking more applications, we're doing a disservice to the 500 or so customers we've already got in the pipeline that are waiting for their money. And it's a matter of life and death, right? There's a lot of people waiting to either hire people or fire people because they have to make their payroll. And if we don't give them the money, they're going to fire the people. So it's a great conundrum to have, but we have to pick the people that already applied and give the money to them so they can save the payroll. The intent of this whole bill is to save jobs. And the longer we take and take more applications in, we're hurting the people that are about to get fired. That's my problem right now. So we cannot take any new applications at the moment.
Excellent. Thank you very much. There's another question from Sanjay Dalal out here. What if a small business owner did not take any salary during the previous 12 months? If they are focused on building the business, can they still use the PPP loan?
Well, I think the answer to that is going to be, it's based on the 12 months average payroll cost. And if they're not on that payroll register, that's what they're doing. All they're doing is taking 12 months average, divide by 12, multiply by 2.5. In a simple math, that's the way it's calculated. So if they haven't taken any salary, they're not on their payroll, and I don't think that can be qualified as payroll. But I can let Chris or Neil edit that question, because I'm not exactly sure. If they're not on payroll, can they add themselves on payroll? Christopher.
Yeah, and if they're a C corporation, unfortunately, their maximum size is dependent on a payroll. So they will have that challenge if they're a C corp or an S corp. They have a difficulty calculating a maximum loan. But if they're some form of independent contractor, sole proprietor, that they'll be able to comply on a 10. They might be able to somehow, well, to cost. The problem that we have with this program is without payroll costs, it's 2.5 times payroll costs. It's hard to get a loan.
Yeah, I'd like to answer that question a little differently if possible. One is absolutely right. It is based on trailing 12-month period. So if you have a $2 million average monthly payrolls of $2 million, the way they evaluate it is they'll take 2 times 2.5. So it becomes a $5 million payout to you to cover your payroll. So it's as simple as that. And then it shouldn't exceed $100,000 per employee. That's another statute. But another way of answering the same question is while he might not qualify under PPP, I encourage him to investigate EIDL or economic injury disaster loan. He might not get paid for the payrolls, but they have a $10,000 grant out there, which he might qualify for depending on the circumstances.
Right.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Could you walk us through? So Ramesh Gajraj has a question here. Based on the application submitted so far, what are you finding the reasons for denials of loans? Can you guide us through that a little bit? Can you shed some light on potential denials and what we should stay away from?
So I'm going to answer that question differently because we haven't had any loans that are denied only because we haven't approved any. It's about eligibility. The SBA has come up with very strict guidelines of what is eligible use of proceeds and not eligible use of proceeds. Since there's no collateral, there's no personal guarantee, to turn a loan down, they've made it easy to not have declinations. What they've done they've taken the declination process and made it into an eligibility process. That if you have more than 500 employees, you don't qualify. If you have 1099, you don't qualify. That's the reason why the denials are very rare, unless it is a blatant, so if they've got DUIs. Just if you look at the normal SBA eligibility requirements, if they don't meet that, then they would not be eligible. So far, we haven't been able to deny any because we just got the applications in and we're now going through the approval process and then the funding process. So now we are validating, verifying all the eligibility requirements. Once we go through that, we may have 1 or 2 that we may have to kick out, say this is not eligible. I'm not sure we're going to do a denial, then you have to do a Reg D. So we're going to go down the path of eligibility rather than credit denial, because it's eligible based on the government guidelines on it.
Ash, thank you very much for that, Ash. Pankaj Mundra asked, how much amount the companies might be eligible if they have employees whose salaries are more than 100,000 for a year. Suppose an employee's salary is 175,000, can a company claim on the basis of 100,000 for employees? So can you give us some guidance on the amount of loans that they're eligible for?
So I think the rules right now, and Neil and Chris can correct me, and Nikki is here too. So it's up to $100,000 per person. So anything above $100,000 is not eligible. If every employee is making $100,000, then you're going to have up to $100,000 cap. Now I don't know, Nikki, is that Chris or Nikki? Individual cap, so there's 5 employees at 500,000 or 550. Each one is capped at 100, right, Chris?
Right, individual cap, you do have that right. They're capped at 500, but other compensation still would be included in the calculation. And that's a clarification they recently made. So you cap it at 500, but when you pay for the group health insurance, that gets added into the payroll cost. You get 2.5 times, and I want to clarify the earlier comment, it's 2.5 times 1 month's payroll. So you look back 12 months. Now you have a choice. You either look at 2019, the full calendar, or you do a trailing 12 months and you figure out your whole payroll, divide by 12, you get to a monthly, and it's 2.5 times. But yes, you just cap the part that's, cash they call it cash compensation.
Did that answer your question, Anshuman? That's up to $100,000. Up to 100 is a cap. Basically, if they have 5 employees, all at 100, they can apply for $500,000.
Yeah, so I think the question was, hey, regardless of what, even if you're if your employee salaries averages are over $100,000, you're capped at 100 as an average, is what you're saying.
Correct. That is correct. That is correct.
There are a few questions from the startup community, and they are saying that, you know, we are owner of startup, we haven't taken salary, but the salaries are sitting on the books. Can we apply for this loan and get our salary? I think the answer is no.
Yeah, the answer is no, because they're looking at the payroll register, either from W-2s or going to ATP. And if you're not on payroll, you can't apply. It's not eligible. That's the problem I have right now with venture capital, private equity, and portfolio companies. I get so many calls from PE and VC companies right now that all the startups, in fact, Wall Street Journal today on page 4 says it, that all startups are in trouble under the current bill, that startups are not eligible because they don't even have payroll yet. They're kind of doing what they call venture capital, and those guys are out. But there's been a conversation about the second bill that's coming in, the $250 billion bill that's coming up in the next week or two, where private equity, venture capital, and startups are going to get included in it, as well as consultants. I can't confirm or deny that at the moment, but that is definitely a question that Congress and SB is dealing with, is what about portfolio companies of private equity, venture capital, and startups? But at the moment, the answer is no.
Got it.
There was a question here about residency requirements. So the application asks if the applicant is a citizen. What are the implications if you're a resident alien person with a person on valid visa with valid permits has formed the company for which they're applying for the loan?
Let me ask Nikki or Chris. I know Neil, do you have I think it's US citizens, but you have a good point. If they're green card or they're on a valid employment visa, do they become eligible, Nikki? You know?
I think they do, but we have to go through the G45 approval. There's this additional.
Neil, can you add Mike or Chris?
Yeah,
It must reside in the US.
The way I understand it is he has to be in the US, conducting business in the US, and that green card needs to be live. So if he's a resident of the US and having a business in the US with a green card, then that's just his personal immigration status, but his business will then be eligible for it. But if he does have a green card and he's working out of another country, then he's not incumbent, and that might not qualify for this. So we have to look at that from a case-by-case basis as what would be an attributable based on his condition.
Excellent.
It seems like the residency of the employee is the most important thing.
Right.
Okay. Another question from a S Corp small business owner, Venkat. He is saying that, because of the S Corp setup, he has been just taking money, but not through the payroll. So will he be able to apply?
No, I think they have to go through payroll. Remember, this is about saving jobs that are on payroll. So we have 8 million people that have lost jobs, going up to 10 million people that were on W-2 or in 1099, which opens up on May 8th. May 8th or 9th is when all the 1099 contractors get to become eligible for the PPP program. So if you're not on payroll, it's unfortunate you become ineligible. The use of proceeds become ineligible.
So this is an interesting question. Does a bankruptcy 10 years ago have an adverse effect on the application?
I don't know. Nikki, Neil?
No, it's within the last 5 years.
Okay. If there's not been a bankruptcy within 5 years, if it's more than 10 years, Chris says it's eligible. Nikki, Neil?
Yeah, I would agree with Chris. The only thing I'd like to add is the business has to be operating as of February 15, 2020. That's the only thing that the rider they have put. So any lease agreements, anything with reference to their paychecks, he needs to be operable prior to February 15, 2020.
So, thank you. So Mike Raja has a question through email here. When you go through the SBA.gov website and try to apply for the loans, can you give us some guidance on navigation? It looks like there are lots of the streamlined process requirements if they're an LLC, etc. Any suggestions on how to submit the application? So logistics and stuff like that. Any clues and tips on how we should ideally do that?
So the question is, so if you're going through SBA.gov, that's for the idle loan, they call it the emergency injury disaster loan. That's directly to SBA.gov. The PPP program is straight to the bank. So I'm hoping the question is about the idle loan rather than the PPP program. So the answer is, if it's an idle loan, then yes, it's straight to SBA.gov. We've had customers that have applied both. We've had customers that have applied for PPP as well as the idle loan. But the idle loan, the banks are not involved in it. It's straight to the SBA through SBA.gov. You get the disaster loan. I think it's 3% for 20 years, 30 years.
Right.
How much is it?
3.75.
3.75 for 30 years. So that's a direct application with SBA, not with the bank.
Okay. I'll take another one. You know, I'm clubbing 2 or 3 questions here.
Yep.
They applied for the loan, and in between they have to let go the employee. And now if the loan gets approved and they get the funding, do they have to go ahead and, you know, rehire those employees?
That is correct. Here's why. Because after 8 weeks period, you want to ask for the forgiveness. So they're going to look at the payroll register now of the employees they have today. If they hire the employees, then 8 weeks later, they're going to ask for forgiveness of the loan. They're going to compare the same employees that you had prior to taking the loan and prior after. So those that were on the payroll then is going to be the ones that are going to get up to what? Prior to 215, then that's going to be forgiven up to 75%, because the rest is for utility interest. So Chris or Neil, can you edit that question?
I think the only thing I'd like to add is, if there is not forgiven, let's say for some reason, he can still let go the employee, but then it will not be subject to forgiven, in which case it becomes a 2-year loan subject to a 1% interest rate. You'll still get the deferment, but then it will be treated as a loan at a subsidized rate.
So my recommendation for that question is, if he's going to rehire them, put him on the payroll register now when he applies, then apply for the loan, then get the loan, then bring him back in, so that those people that he was thinking about rehiring are on the payroll register right now. Because remember, it's an average of 2.5 times of your last year's payroll. So they're not asking for specifics. They're only asking for the dollar amount. My preference would be, if you're going to do that, then put it on the payroll register that you're going to submit for the PPP loan, add those jobs back on, then apply the amount that way to.
So
Yeah, to be specific about it, I hope I can be heard now.
Christopher, what happened?
much better.
We can sign it. Your daughter signed off, right? Now it's
Thank you.
She was video streaming. I know that. That's why it happened. So tell your daughter to get off.
I said that a long time ago. I think it's neighbors. But anyway, to be specific about it, you're going to get the check. So this is really important. So you have 8 weeks to spend the money after receiving the check. It's really when you receive the proceeds from the loan. You have to spend it over the next 8 weeks. And when you spend it over the next 8 weeks, to maximize the forgiveness, and that's what we're all trying to do with you and for you, to maximize the forgiveness, 75% plus must go towards payroll. So you're in a position to time, I don't want to say game it, but you're in a position to truly time the placement of the employees back on at the time you get the check, so you could spend it on those employees.
Cool. Thank you very much for that. So just one more question here. Most of the banks have stopped the application process. Do you think they're going to start the process soon? And is EIDL forgivable loan?
EIDL is not a forgivable loan. It requires collateral, personal guarantees. Its benefit is it's nice that it goes out 30 years, but there is a way to make a piece of it forgivable. And in fact, it's mandatory. If they applied and received an EIDL loan and it was used for payroll, what they should do is refinance it into their PPP loan. Then that was used for payroll, then that could be forgiven. So that's the way to get forgiveness for that piece of the EIDL loan.
Excellent. I am venturing to say the answer to this question is no, but please clarify. What if you started payroll in January of this year, no payroll in 2019? Can you apply with January and February payroll date? And I think based on Ash's prior question, it's 2019 average times 2 or something, right?
Actually, if you weren't in business, somebody read that very carefully, because you can use, Nikki could probably back me up on this as well as Neil. If you weren't in business, you don't have the experience for 2019, but you were in business as of February 15th, you could use your payroll number average for January 1st through February 29th.
Brilliant. Awesome. Good question there. So thank you for that.
I have one more from Raj Mitra. We are a healthcare startup. We are funded with VC by an investor in the UK. We have 35 people in the USA. The investor owns about 45% equity. The rest is owned by employees. Are we eligible for PPP? What he has not written that, do they have any employee on payroll or not here, the 35 people in the US? So I don't know how to.
I think it's a no. Christopher, you can correct me. I think it's a no based on beneficial ownership and citizenship, because they have to go through a BO that more than 25% ownership have to be US citizens. So if the ownership is more than 25 and it's a foreign entity, I say it's not eligible, but I'll let Neil and Christopher correct me.
Yeah, I was going down, sorry.
Go ahead, Neil, go ahead.
I was going down the same path. Much depends on the specifics of the transaction. So I think there are other conduits that are implicit within that question itself, which is foreign borrowings, foreign inception of capital. But for the payroll protection program, given its beneficial ownership is in a foreign entity, that's sort of outside of the PPP program that they currently have launched.
I think one way to answer some of the questions that we've been able to educate ourselves and staff members is this CARES Act program. What it did was leverage the SBA 7A program. It's really a derivative or a add-on product to the SBA 7A. And so like Neil said, because it's not permissible, things that aren't permissible, they made some adjustments like to the affiliate rules, which I'm surprised we haven't got a question yet. But they did make some adjustments for the affiliate rules. But if it's ineligible for a 7A loan, it's in, like Neil explained with that type of example, it's going to be ineligible for this PPP loan.
Yeah, remember, Christopher, this is for the small. I'm not surprised. This is small business. So I don't think the affiliate rule, these are independent small owner. That's why it's called the TiE Indus Entrepreneurs, are smaller companies. So I'm not surprised that there's no affiliate rules here because these are small companies. Go ahead, Anshuman. Next question.
Yeah, another one which came in, if you have multiple S or C Corp, can each Corp apply for PPP separately, even when the different Corps have the same management team or ownership?
Christopher.
Absolutely, we encourage them to do that. Each corporation applies. Now, we're talking about affiliating the corporations. As long as in combination, they don't exceed 500 employees, they can apply under each LLC, each corporate entity. And in fact, they need to apply that way.
Yeah, so for hotels, it's 500, it's each hotel locations, but for C Corp, it's each tax ID. So you can segregate it for the code NAICS 72 is based on locations, but then the rest of them are based on C Corps. And that doesn't, you don't have to aggregate or affiliate them, so they should apply separately.
So for these, there's a question here saying, what kind of documentation or physical reports are required to qualify or to be submitted and qualify?
Christopher, there's a eligibility checklist we can send in terms of the reason why that's an important question for you only because the reason we kept it for our own customers is your KYC, CIP, and BSA. We have to go through know your customer. So validating the identity, validating the C Corp or the formation documentation, authorized signers, the bylaws, the driver's license. If you're not a customer, we start from ground zero. If you're an existing customer, I have all the data. All I got to do is populate the form. So that's the difficulty. The most important thing I would say is go to your bank. Now, I say that tongue in cheek, because Wells Fargo has shut it down. They can only do 10 million. They don't want to take any new applications. BofA is already saying if you don't have an account, loan, or a credit card, we don't accept it. JP Morgan is already saying take a number, we'll call you back. I've heard this from all these banks that each one of these banks have put up a filter, right? That you cannot walk into a bank and say, I want to apply, and everybody's saying no, because there's so much eligibility check boxes you have to do. That's one issue. The verification of identity is the second issue, because there's a lot of fraud that can happen. People can make up payroll registers. People can give, that's the other part the bankers are really worried about. How do we determine and verify the information and the identity? Both we have to verify.
Interesting. But the checklist, if you have one, if you could share that, that'll be very good. We could share it with our attendees out here, if you had one. So
if you go to, I'll give you this. If you go to treasury.gov, let me give you that, and look for, there's two checklists on treasury.gov, borrower's check, PPP borrower checklist or lender's checklist. There's two, it's on the web. You don't have to do it. Just click on it. It'll give you 2 pages. Go through that. It's called a PPP borrower's checklist. And the second one is lenders, PPP lenders checklist, right, Christopher? They're all on treasury.gov.
They are. But allow me to help out a little bit as far as the documentation. Ash actually explained very well what the challenges for non-customers. We have encouraged everyone to go to the bank where they have a lending relationship. That is your best source to qualify, because of the reasons Ash said. All organizational documents are already there. But the challenge that I've become aware of is supporting your payroll numbers. That's probably the biggest challenge that people are having. If you have a W-3 and you have 941 and 940s, that definitely helps. But then they usually ask, give us some detailed payroll records by employee so we can see if there's any over 100,000. So if you use someone like ADP, it's easier. If you use something like QuickBooks, you have to download it and send that to your bank.
There is another one. How do either of the loans work for individual property owners filing on a Schedule E? No employee but losing rents and still need to pay expenses, mortgages, property taxes, etc. Do they qualify for anything?
I don't have a good answer for that because it's not favorable. Without having payroll in there, probably hold it in an LLC. There's nothing out yet as far as I'm aware.
I've had multiple questions like that. So investor properties are not eligible because remember, this is a small business program. It's an SBA, Small Business Administration, which is an owner-occupied building for small businesses that employ and create employment. Investor properties are not eligible. Investors are not eligible. Remember, this is an owner-occupied, owner-proprietor, sole proprietor that is in the small business arena of say less than 500 employees are the only ones that are eligible. So it's not for investment or investor properties.
And I would like to add to that. I think the way this program is working for the payroll protection program, it's a subset of the SBA 7A loan program.
Correct.
So I encourage folks to go and read if they qualify under an SBA 7A loan program. It's on the SBA website. Only then would you be considered for a PPP. So if you're something else outside of that, that's a different discussion.
Excellent. First of all, I just want to take a minute and thank all three of you. There are so many questions coming in. We are trying to process it between Anshuman and myself and ask you, but thank you so much for addressing all these things. We have over 48 questions from about 91 attendees, so I really appreciate that. So Anshuman, did you have want to go through any question here?
Yeah, I'm answering some of the questions. So you take the next one, and by the time I'll be ready with another question,
Excellent. Our employee, an anonymous attendee asks this question, and you guys are still up for it, right? We are till 12:30, right?
Yeah, we have 10 minutes.
So we have 10 more minutes to go.
We have 10. So an anonymous employee asks this question, our employee left and joined another company on March 5. Will he be counted as part of the employee count or those on payroll at the time of loan origination?
Christopher.
Yeah, the issue you're going to have there, they could be counted as your employee because you have a choice when you apply to get the loan, you could look at all calendar year 2019 and then take an average of that monthly average and get 2.5 times that, or the trailing 12 months. If the employee's there. If the employee was there on March 5th and you use the trailing 12 months, let's say from February month on going backwards, and you figure out what your average monthly payroll is, that employee is going to count for you. Your challenge you're going to have is once the loan is made, the check is in your hands. Now you have 8 weeks to spend that check. And remember, you want to spend it 75% plus for payroll. That's going to be your challenge because that employee is no longer on your staff, and you really need to manage it to where you pay payroll. So that employee not being on your staff will be a challenge for you in spending it in a way that it's forgiven.
Excellent. Just a note from Shankaram on our chat panel. Thanks, Ash, Chris, and Neil. Informative session. Thanks for your time, Shankaram. So just in case you've not seen that again, thank you seriously to all three of you. So really appreciate it.
Most welcome.
Couple of more questions here. This comes from Azad Work, is there a dedicated resource that applicants with no existing relationship with a bank can reach out to for PPP application? Not sure we asked this question. So is there a resource that we can go to for non?
That has been a challenge, and I'll let Neil also speak to it. That is a regrettable challenge because without having it's predominantly a lending relationship or maybe a sizable deposit relationship, there has been difficulties in finding a channel to make the loan available. And it's been a real search for a lot of parties to have a friend in banking. I don't know of any group or any platforms or channels that is serving those that have no banking relationship and are having trouble getting in with the local area banks. Neil, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would say it's really is first come, first served, and most of the banks are moving, and I resonate what Chris just mentioned. My only thing is relationship banking has never been more important till right now. And in moments like this, you realize the importance of working with your bank in tough times, working with your bank and making sure you have an established relationship going. That being said, I think I encourage this person to actually contact multiple banks to see who would take him. This might be something that he has to shop around for in the lack of a relationship with the banks to see what can be accommodated. While the regulation itself does not distinguish between applicable between applicable relationship and not applicable relationship, I think it's better to develop relationships. So it's a lesson learned for your client to essentially tell him, work with the bank that will stand behind you, as much as Ash, Chris, and me are promising our client base saying you will be taken care of if you bank with us for several years. So I just want to answer that in a different perspective.
Excellent. Rahul Rajan has one question out here. When do they start EIDL first 10K deposit? And where do you specify the EIDL loan amount, as an initial application page does not have a section for adding loan amount?
I think Ash is on mute.
I think I understand the question. Let me give it a try.
I think it's a good question.
So the lender you're working with, you need to make them aware of the balance of the loan, or the amount of loan that you received through the EIDL program. It's you have to notify them, and then they refinance that into this new forgivable loan. If you go through the SBA website and you apply for a loan, they just by way of application, they actually grant you $10,000, and that is not to be paid back. You don't have to pay back that initial $10,000. But for the amount that you refinance, it's really a communication process. And to be specific about the EIDL loan being refinanced into the PPP, for that to happen at the time that you're applying, you would have had to already got funded from the EIDL loan. If you haven't been funded at this point, I think it's through, if I remember right, it's through April 3rd. Then you can't refinance it into the PPP loan.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. One question here, one last question, and then what I'd like to do is if you guys, if you each gentleman could give some closing remarks, some guidance, we really appreciate your time. If your only source of income is 1099 miscellaneous, are you eligible to apply for PPP or EIDL?
Yes, April 10th.
Okay, okay. So, so that is what I have here. Anshuman, Anil, did you have anything before we give the floor? I want to give the floor to Ash, Neil, and Christopher.
One question came is some of the startups which are bootstrapped, can they apply for disaster loan?
I don't know, Christopher. I think they can.
I think that in fact, yes, I actually think the disaster loan is probably the better choice between the two without having strong payroll to use.
Okay. When is the deadline or start date? Do you have guys have any?
They're both open right now.
Open right here.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think the
June
disaster
30th.
loan will be, yeah, I think the disaster loan will continue to remain till 90 more days. They're both open now. I think the PPP program, there's a second tranche being approved by Congress by Tuesday. So that's also going to, another 250 billion is discussed right now because the problem they found is much deeper than they thought it was. So the 350 is already used up. They're looking at another 250 coming in. So I think they'll go till September, October of this year. So I would say both programs are open till, I would say, third quarter. As long as the money still is available, that was allocated under the $2 trillion, they'll continue to open this program with a second allocation coming out maybe next week or the week after.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One more question, Ash. People are asking that, how they can start a business relationship with your bank.
Good question. So we have a website. We have all of our people that are working really, really hard. I would say that what they've done is that I've tried to limit the traffic going to my loan officers. I have still a couple of more. I would say whoever wants to, I just want to make sure that my staff doesn't get overwhelmed. Give them my email. It's going to blow up. I know that. But then we will pick and choose to, because we only have 10 locations, right? So we don't have a lot of locations. We don't have anything in Cerritos. So I will just be the first filter because I don't want to have, maybe Neil and I can be the filter and I'll leave Christopher to go handle but by now, Christopher, you've seen it's 167 million. We just went up $15 million in the last 1 hour. We're growing by 10 to 15 million per hour in applications. We're at 167 right now, right? So I'm scared right now. We have so much business, we can't handle it. So unfortunately, I really don't want to commit something to an individual that has employees that are dependent on it. So I want to set appropriate expectations because the last thing we can do is set expectations that we cannot deliver and they have employees and their livelihoods being jeopardized. So sorry to be rude, but we just cannot handle it. And we're a small bank, so we're not set up like BFA that we can handle hundreds of thousands of applications at one time. We cannot. Now we have a new program. I understand Christopher Abrigo's up, so we have an automated program now that we will open up next week. So what I would just do is Neil and I can field those questions. We'll send you to a website. It's now fully automated. You have to go through the automation process and we can open up a little bit more volume and capacity starting next week. But I think the next week and a half or so, the money we have right now reserved for my existing, I need to give those money up so they can make the payroll and keep their business open. And then I'll open up another box so we can then look at other individuals like TiE, we call it friends and family of Ash Patel. Then you get into the friends and family bucket and then we can open that up, right? So I would say Neil and I.
Yeah. So the email to Neil and Ash is a great funnel. But I'd say keep visiting our website. Check with our website as well because we know there's going to be additional congressional funding. I think they're getting together on Thursday. Yeah. There's some squeaky wheels there, and they're gonna work out the different party differences and make more funds available. And it's through June 30th. So keep checking our website, and we're going to try to continue to fun beyond imagination because the Federal Reserve has also given us a liquidity opportunity. They're formulating it right now that might allow us to use these loans to get additional funding. So that's what our CFO is exploring right at this second. So if you did, so it's worth the extra effort to keep going back.
Also, let me set good expectations so that you people understand what we're going through. We have 500 applicants today that have a E-Tran for $170 million. I have another 300 applications already on my website, on my waiting list. Already 300 on my website that I'm waiting for. So I have 5 plus 3, that's 800 applications. That is over 250 million that I have to commit before even any one of TiE members even go to my website. Now, we're trying to automate the process so that we don't have to wait. This is just becoming unmanageable. It's a great thing for the bank that we have so much business, but I wish we were ready and I wish we didn't know that we had so much. So all I can tell you is there's going to be an automated process on the website. It's called a Grigo. It's an application process that no human being has to get involved. We'll be happy to send you the link or go to the website. I think, Christopher, you'll upload it today. And I think it's already up or not. It'll be up by the end of the day or end of this week. Then it's a fully automated process, which will then be able to process much faster the applications that is fully automated. It's an automated platform that goes through the whole process and we have to just fund the loan.
Brilliant. Ash, I wanted to say thank you. You have taken the time, you and your team have taken the time to help us here at TiE, think of us and make time for us in a time where you are so very busy. Unlike the big banks, BOA and Wells Fargo, you have made time for us. So we really owe you a big, big thank you. And hopefully when we get out of this COVID situation and actually see you, we can actually buy you a bottle of wine to say thank you for this. So truly appreciate it.
No worry, I've been a member of TiE for 10 years when Navneet was there, and Shankar. So I've been a big fan of your guys. I've been a keynote speaker there several times at Cerritos, many times. So I've been with you guys for a long, long time. So
yeah, Ash and Navneet and Shankar both are very much there. Both of them are on our board of directors and they are very much there.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And that takes time, right? I mean, being there is one thing, actually taking time and helping us out and answering 51 questions, right? So
this whole seminar was very interactive. You made it very helpful for our members. It was more Q&A. Not many people do that. And it's amazing you have done that. You took it from the start.
Yeah.
I've done several of these.
Any closing thoughts? Any closing thoughts, Ash, and then Anshuman, and then we'll. I appreciate your time. I know we've run over by nearly 5 minutes, so I really appreciate.
My only comment is go to your bank. Every one of you have a checking account, guaranteed, because you have banking relationship. Go to your bank and ask them how can you apply for this. Even though some people, it's really hard to go to a large bank. We will do everything we can. We have a couple of small community banks that I can also refer you to. There's First Choice Bank that's right down the street from you guys. I know them really well. So we will help anybody we can to get people down to where they need to go to. But we at the moment are fully capacitated. Maybe next week we can open up for TiE members. So my question is, go to our website, give my email. We'll do everything we can to help, but your bank is your best bet right now. Go to your current bank as your best bet to see how you can get this current time completed. Chris and Neil, any final words so we can leave?
I will, and I still want to provide information. I'll end with some additional remarks about information. Do exactly what Ash says, but also be prepared. Don't give up. Never give up is life lesson. But don't give up and keep trying. It's open through June 30th, and I'm confident that with Congress reconvening, that there's going to be an additional 349 trillion. I expect at least another billion. Excuse me. I expect another 200 billion to be added to it. So don't think you're going to be shut out. Keep trying. Have 3 things ready. Have your payroll records ready. Maybe I'll say 4 or 5 things. Have all your payroll records ready. Have your W-3 available. Have your 940s available and your 941s available. Be ready for when it's open, and the group health insurance documents that demonstrate it. If you use an ADP service, that's very easy to have the payroll records. If you don't, try to have your QuickBooks or whatever data you have. Other than that, I'm like Ash. I really want to help as many TiE members on this phone as we can. Neil?
Thank you, Chris. I resonate what you just said. I think in order to summarize and based on the questions received, I would like to say three things. First, for payroll processing, for payroll protection, please go through your bank, through your nearest bank. If you don't have a relationship, develop a relationship. This is a learning experience for some of those that have not an established relationship with a bank, and I think you should pursue that. Secondly, if you do not qualify under PPP, and you are facing economic hardship, go for EIDL, economic injury disaster loan. But first and foremost, keep in mind, these are SBA 7A loans, and if you need to be qualifying under those to get those. Thirdly, I would say that we as bankers, and me specifically from a risk, we look for elements of fraud. So please be cognizant of the fact that you have adequate documentation. I do recognize that this is an opportunity that has been given by the federal government for all through the banks. But any misconduct or misuse, I know that speaking to California defense attorneys, where we are essentially preparing to see what are some of these actions, such as falsifying documents and so forth, would be subject to felony charges. So on one side, there is a huge opportunity to participate and make sure your business stays afloat. On the other side, any fraud-related activities are subject to felony and as well as full power of the legal that would follow from, I suspect, the federal side of things, and we continue to evaluate that. But this is a great opportunity to establish a relationship with your bank, and like Ash mentioned, and then Chris also alluded to, we are here to help and serve you if you do consider us for your banking needs going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ash, Christopher, and Neil, and more so Tommy also. We were on a call 30 minutes prior to our webinar, and she helped us in putting everything together. Thanks, Shankar, for bringing this great panelist, and thanks, Ravi, for conducting this and moderating this event.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anil.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
I don't know
Thank
how
you so much,
to
Ash. and
Zoom
team.
clap, but we are trying to do a Zoom applause and incorporate it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
All
so
right,
much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, guys. Thank you. Hopefully, yeah. And Anshuman, this is going to be recorded and posted on the website, correct?
Yes, it was broadcasted live, and now we are going to put the recording also.
Excellent.
And we'll capture all the Q&A too.
Thanks, guys. Take
Thank
care.
you.
That ends our broadcast.
Bye-bye.